your next challenge is entitled Return the Index of All Capital Letters. You are to create a function that takes a single string as argument and returns an ordered array containing the indices of all capital letters in the string. Check the examples below. We have Edabit. Notice that, and remember, these are zero-based numbering, so the letter E would be 0, D would be index 1, A would be 2, capital B would be 3, and you notice it picking off the capital letters, D at 1, B at 3, and T at index 5. I think that's pretty clear. Notice all capital letters down here gives every index. Yeah, I think those make sense and are pretty clear. They do note the special case to return an empty array if no uppercase letters are found in the string. And do note that special characters and numbers will be included in some test cases, so you have to be on the lookout for that. Let's go over to code. Now it's your turn to come up with a solution. Please pause and resume the video when you're ready. Okay, so I'm going to use link, and we've used the select method before, but there's a slightly different way to use it. We're going to use a new overload that allows you to have the index as well, which is quite handy. So if you notice in the select method, one of these overloads, can you see this in the middle here, this int32? We're kind of used to it taking the one parameter, but in this case it's going to take two parameters, tsource and int32. That integer will represent the element's index, so that's quite handy. We can have that in a select statement. And then, yeah, the third argument's the return type. We learned that about func. So let's go back, and we can return string is an enumerable of character type, right, of char type, and we're going to use this new select method. What we're going to do then is to grab the index of each element, right? And we're going to do a little work. Basically what I'm going to do is, if it's a capital letter, return the unmodified index value of where it occurs in the string, the current index. Otherwise I'm going to return -1, and that's going to be kind of like a marker, like for my next stage of processing, where I'm going to say if the number encountered is less than 0, I'm not going to keep it. I'm going to basically discard it, and that should leave me with just the capital letters. So that's how I'm going to go about this. So for our select statement, then we know now it's going to take two parameters. Before we would use this ch as a variable name to represent the char that is taken in one at a time from the string. Now we get 2, and I'm just going to call the index index. That'll be the name of that. And so for our lambda now, what I want to do is check if this is an uppercase letter. And we've used methods in the past to do that. Hopefully you remember. We can say char, remember we have is letter, but we also have to check if it's uppercase. We've used both of these before, hopefully you remember. Char is upper. And then if it's both, I'm going to return the index. Otherwise, I'm going to return -1, right? And maybe, okay. I should probably split this. This screen is too small, so let's put it on a new line. Okay. And then I'm going to use where to filter. Do you remember where we give it a predicate, and it can filter out results that we don't want, and that's perfect here. So remember now, we chose select, and what we're returning here is select transforms our sequence into something else, we learned. But notice how normally I would return a char, right? We kind of stay with the same type. Here, index and -1 represent integers. So the collection that resulted from this select statement is now a collection of integers. So for making our lambda in the where case here, I'm going to remember that I'm dealing with numbers now. I'm dealing with integers. I'll use num for my parameter name, and then we need a predicate, something that returns true or false, our filter condition. So I'm going to say num is greater than -1, right? If it's a -1, I've decided it's not a capital letter and I don't want it. I only want the capital letters. And then finally, we know that these link methods return enumerable collections, and we need to return an array. So we have toArray, right? Okay. One where, okay, we've got our using statements. So let's try giving this a shot. I probably didn't need the enclosing parentheses here. I put them in to be safe. You could look up the order of operations to see if they're needed or not. They don't hurt anything, so whenever I'm not entirely sure, just throw on some parentheses to be safe. And a lot of times your IDE, when you use one, will tell you if parentheses are unnecessary. So that's why I did it that way. You could have also written out an if-else statement here if you wanted to do it that way. You could have said, you know, wrap this whole thing if this condition here, return index, otherwise return -1. You can write it out that way too if you like. But yeah, you can see it passed all of the tests. I hope this is clear. The new part again, now instead of passing one parameter, we have an overload where we can bring the index in, which is quite handy. We're not forced to write out a for loop. We can have, or to make a local variable here that would count up and then we increment it. So that's quite handy. Checking if it is a letter and upper. If so, take the index that it's at. Otherwise, I made up this value here to represent something that isn't a capital letter. And then finally, in our where case, we're just checking if the value is greater than -1, and we're remembering that the type change here, we're not dealing with an enumerable of characters anymore. After this select statement, because we filled it with integers, now we're dealing with integers. So I named my variable num. You could name it something else. I simply check if it's greater than -1, and if it is, we want to take it. Finally package it up into an array, because that's what we promised to return by this method signature. And yeah, it all worked out there. So feel free to share whatever solution you came up with. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next challenge. Thanks.